Good morning. This is a hearing by the Special Committee on Child Separations in Philadelphia. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can be found on phlcouncil.com. I note that the hour has come. Clerk, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Bass.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I am present. Looking forward to today's hearing. Good morning.
Good morning, Co-Chair.
Nadeem Bazar.
Good morning, everyone. I am present and looking forward to the hearings as well.
Good morning.
Rochelle Blau.
Good morning, council members and committee. I am available and will listen in.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Yolanda Bryant.
Good morning, City Council. I'm present and I'm looking forward to this hearing.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Robin Cooper.
I know she will not be able to attend.
Brianna Donahue. Paul Panapinto. Vicky Suarez. Richard Wexler.
Hello, I'm Richard Wexler, and I'm very pleased to be here and have the opportunity to take part in this hearing.
Good morning.
And Chair O.
I'm present. This hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing of the Special Committee on Child Separations pertaining to resolution number 210914. Clerk, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 210914, authorizing Council Special Committee on Child Separations in Philadelphia to conduct public hearings to further understand the role of community umbrella agencies, such as Turning Points for Children, in the local child welfare system and further investigate the systemic failures that resulted in 3 girls being returned to their sexually abusive father.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you're consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized in order to comply with the Sunshine Act. The chat feature must only be used for this purpose. At this time, before we begin, I'd like to ask the co-chair if she has any opening statements.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your work on this very important issue. As we know, in the city of Philadelphia, as the numbers have improved, but we had the unfortunate distinction of having more out-of-child placements than any other city in the nation. And there is something, I believe, that's critically wrong with that. So I'm looking forward to this hearing so that we can really examine what is happening and why it is happening. And about not necessarily any one individual case, although there are some that are quite egregious that we need to call attention to. But across the board, We know that these are the ones that sort of stuck out, but there are some that probably need a lot of attention to be drawn on them as well, and we just don't know about them. But looking at the entire system and fixing, some of the things that need to be fixed very quickly, is a goal of this committee. And I'm really looking forward to working with you, Councilman, on this, because it's just unfathomable, the idea of removing a child from a household situation in which they could actually stay, and with the right supports and with the right, programs in place for that entire family, not just the parents, not just the child, but what else can we do and how can we do it to keep families unified? That at the end of the day always has to be our goal. So I just really want to thank you and all of my colleagues and everyone sitting on this committee for all of your work leading up into this point and beyond, because there is work to be done, and I certainly look forward to doing my fair share. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. At this time, I'd like to ask if any other members of the special committee would like to make a statement. Seeing none, I will make a statement. This is very challenging because we have read in the newspaper. This is where I discovered it, and many of my colleagues. And I want to thank Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson for raising this through a resolution that ultimately led to this resolution to hold a hearing. However, outside of what we read in the newspaper, there is a confidentiality agreement as part of the legal settlement. So there are some restrictions in what we can know, and there is a state law that prevents privacy of children and other individuals' cases to the extent the law prevents a public conversation or even private conversation about details of what occurred. What we are trying to do is to look at how our city government is caring for vulnerable children, especially those that are subject to abuse, and how we are trying to not only help them, but also help their families. In this case, this is a situation where the father, the biological father, was abusing his three daughters physically, sexually, and emotionally in horrific manners. And the three young girls were removed from him, from his ability to harm them, and that is where the system works. It removes those children from the harm. Unfortunately, they were subject to additional harm, and from there, somehow, and we're not clear on this, they were returned to him despite his criminal record, his open case, his lack of financial ability to care for them, and not having a location or a home. I believe he had 8 different addresses, none of which appear to be his home. And beyond that, a history of 4 years of abuse. And then the 3 sisters, his daughters, are returned to him where they are subject to further physical and sexual abuse. And how that happened and what happened is what we're trying to find out in order to see how we as a government and a society can and better care for those in our charge. It is challenging for us as a special committee to try to investigate this because of the restrictions and confidentiality. But then how do we as a legislative body provide the oversight and legislative solutions we should be providing when it's very difficult to understand what happened? The Department of Human Services is in charge of this, and they have conducted their internal investigation. I'm of the understanding that those investigations certainly in detail cannot be shared with us, but what we're looking for is the approach and lessons learned, those type of things, and a overall sense of how does DHS manage these cases and the community umbrella agencies. And we're going to hear from our DHS commissioner today about that. We have invited the community umbrella agency that has been identified through the news article that is Turning Points for Children to testify. To my knowledge, they are sending a written statement. I don't have it as of this moment. And then we have some additional witnesses who wanted to testify and those who want to make public comment. We do have on our special committee a person who is very familiar with what happened because he is one of the attorneys. However, he is not a witness. He is a member of this special committee, and as a highly respected attorney, will use his judgment as to when and how he can make comments or share some level of insight within the restrictions that he is bound to by law. My interest is also this, and I want to say this so that all witnesses will understand what my concerns are. A system that is overloaded, staff that are overwhelmed, DHS workers needing to not only do their work, but supervise community umbrella agency workers, or as they're called, CUAs, community umbrella organization workers. What are the red flags? What's the accountability? And is this the result of a system, albeit much of it from state law, that requires investigation, follow-up on things that include rumor, that include anonymous allegations that provide no reasonable suspicion, an overworked system where even children in good homes are subject to investigation and separation, while children like these three sisters fall through the cracks because of a lack of attention, burnout, turnover. Is this a system in need of reform, or is this an example of something through human error that unfortunately occurred, which can be improved, but is not a situation where the policy and practices need to be changed? Perhaps there's some other issues that I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable what occurred. I think had it not been for the newspaper article, we would not know. And how many other cases like this are out there where we don't know. So that, from my perspective, is what we are looking at. And how we're going to proceed is the clerk will call our witnesses, and after the testimony of the panel, and sometimes there's only one witness on the panel, I will open it up for questions by the co-chair and the members of this special committee. So with that, I'll ask the clerk to call the first panel to testify this morning.
The first witness is Kimberly Ali, Commissioner, Philadelphia Department of Human Services.
Good morning, Commissioner. Still morning. Are you connected and ready to proceed?
I am, Councilmember O.
Thank you very much. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. And I believe you may have a PowerPoint to present.
I do. So I will ask, thank you, Heather Key, for sharing the PowerPoint now.
I do see it. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Good morning, City Council members O, Bast, and members of the Council's Special Committee on Child Separations in Philadelphia. My name is Kimberly Ali. I am the Commissioner of the City of Philadelphia Department of Human Services. With me today are Samuel B. Harrison III, Deputy Commissioner for Child Welfare Operations, Nadine Parisi, Chief Financial Officer, as well as other members of my team. As you know, child welfare is extremely hard work. Therefore, I must take the time to thank DHS and CUA staff, as well as our providers, for their dedication and commitment to children, youth, and families, even during a global pandemic. As essential employees, they have the tremendous responsibility to ensure that children and youth are safe and that they are provided with services to meet their individual needs. Despite the threat of COVID-19, our DHS and CUA staff continued to assess the safety of children and youth in person, while fearing for their own safety as well as the safety of their families. Because of their tireless and selfless work, quality services were uninterrupted. Today, we have been asked to provide testimony on the Improving Outcomes for Children model, and more specifically on the progress of the community umbrella agencies, also known as CUAs. Next slide. CUAs are community-based organizations assigned to geographical regions in the city. CUAs provide case management services to children and families in need of child welfare services. Next slide. DHS continues to operate the 24/7 Philadelphia Child Abuse Hotline, refer families for prevention services to divert them from formal child welfare services, conduct investigations of abuse and neglect, identify placements with a focus on kinship care, providing training and technical assistance to DHS and CUA staff, as well as evaluate and monitor the CUAs for quality service delivery. CUAs have full case management responsibilities for families once a case is accepted for formal child welfare services. Where DHS and CUAs have shared interactions is during case transition from investigations to accept for service, as well as during the family team conferences. Next slide. CUAs were created after the tragic death of Danielle Kelly exposed severe challenges in the city's child welfare system. A panel of experts convened by former Mayor John Street made 37 recommendations, and among them found that families were not able to get the necessary services in their own neighborhoods, and most importantly, the existing child welfare system lacked accountability due to the blurred roles between city and provider case managers. After several years of community and stakeholder engagement, Improving Outcomes for Children was developed. The fundamental characteristics of IOC and the resulting CUA system is that it is community-based and premised on a model of one case manager, one family, and one plan. As you can see from this slide, the tragic death of Danielle Kelly occurred in 2006. Mayor Street appointed the Child Welfare Review Panel in 2007, and the Community Oversight Board was created to monitor the department's progress with implementing the recommendations of the Child Welfare Review Panel. From 2007 to 2011, there were 4 years of planning for IOC. In 2012, the first 2 CUAs were selected, and in 2013, the first 2 CUAs began providing case management services. Next slide. The 4 goals of IOC are: more children and youth are maintained safely in their own homes and communities, more children and youth achieve timely reunification or other permanence, a safe reduction in the use of congregate care, improved child, youth, and family functioning. Next slide. CUAs were fully implemented in 2015. That same year, state legislation dramatically changed the Pennsylvania child abuse law in multiple ways, including by lowering the standard for child abuse and expanding its definition, expanding who must report abuse, and moving to an electronic state child abuse reporting system. These changes in law resulted in major impacts to DHS work, including an increased number of reports into the DHS hotline, an unprecedented number of investigations, and an increase in the number of children and youth receiving in-home and out-of-home services. As you can see from this slide again, at the same time that all 10 CUAs were operational in 2015, there were the changes to the Child Protective Services law. In 2018, Mayor Kenney appointed a Child Welfare Oversight Board to continue to oversee DHS progress. The CWOB continues to provide oversight to DHS. DHS response to the significant increased calls to the hotline included establishing field screening units to review General Protective Services reports with the purpose of diverting families from the formal child welfare system and offering families prevention services. These changes, combined with our CUA partnerships, have helped us improve outcomes for children and families. The IOC system is working. Here are some of the significant improvements. Next slide. We work to divert families from the child welfare system to better support families. We know that many Philadelphians live in poverty. The goal of our diversion services is to support families to safely care for their children without DHS involvement. DHS diversion program served 5,182 children and youth in fiscal year 2021, from ensuring connections to ongoing physical and mental health care to paying for concrete support. Diversion services stabilize families. Our CUAs continue to serve more than 2,000 children and youth in their own homes on any given day. These supportive services increase parents and caregivers' ability to provide safe and a nurturing home environment while the child remains with his or her parent. Next slide. We have significantly reduced the number of children in out-of-home care. At the end of 2017, there were 6,183 children in placement. As of today, there are 3,995 children in placement, which is a 35% decrease in the number of children and youth in placement. Next slide. Our entry rate, or entries into placement, have also decreased. Entries refer to the number of children and youth who are removed from their families. In 2017, according to data published by Casey Family Programs, Philadelphia's entry rate was 7.0 per 1,000 children. However, as of FY21, it is 4.3 per 1,000 children. This is a 39% decrease in the rate of children and youth entering placement. Next slide. 51% of children in placement are currently placed with family or someone that they know in kinship care homes, compared to 40.9% at the beginning of improving outcomes for children. This puts us well above the national average of 34%. Next slide. From 2017 to present, 5,235 children have been reunified with their families. It is DHS priority to help families stay together, and when we are unable to safely do so, our goal is to reunify as quickly as possible. Reunification strategies include connecting families to services in the community, regular and frequent visits from a caseworker, parent education, and behavioral health supports, to name a few. Next slide. Prior to IOC, there were 888 youth in residential placement. Today, we have 277 youth in residential placement. Additionally, we are committed to further diverting families to community-based services and eliminating disproportionality across the formal child welfare system. Our entry rate and disproportionality study, in partnership with Casey Family Programs and the University of Pennsylvania, identifies significant disparities in reporting to the hotline and how these disparities stayed constant throughout the trajectory of a family with DHS services. I am not proud to say this. However, you must make an admission before you will see changes. Unfortunately, Black children are overrepresented in the child welfare system. We are committed to doing better. In doing so, we partner with the Philadelphia Department of Health and successfully apply for a Family Support for Primary Prevention grant from the federal government with the goal of expanding primary prevention efforts and eliminating disparities. Two core components of this grant are the expansion of the Department of Health's Philly Families Can support line to divert calls that would typically be made to the child abuse hotline about non-abuse issues and connect families with concrete supports and resources, and a new information campaign and training for mandated reporters to help them support families in need when there are no abuse concerns. We hope to transform mandated reporters into mandated supporters. We have also partnered with Casey Family Programs and the Center for the Study of Social Policy to assess and revise our policies as it relates to the removal of children and youth from their homes using an anti-racist lens. In 2018, Mayor Kinney signed a new executive order to create the Child Welfare Oversight Board, or the CWOB. The CWOB primarily provides oversight for IOC. It also reviews and assesses DHS progress in implementing other reform initiatives. The department's progress implementing the recommendations outlined in a third-party evaluation of IOC, as well as any other reforms suggested by the board. It also provides recommendations to DHS on its needs-based plan and budget. Next slide. In addition to the public quarterly reporting on key data indicators for child welfare, we also publish the annual CUA scorecard. The CUA scorecard was developed in partnership with national child welfare experts. It evaluates and monitors the CUA's progress. It has proven to be an invaluable tool to improve system performance by creating a blueprint to assess CUA service delivery and a roadmap to achieve IOC goals. As you can see from this slide, the CUA scorecard was first published in 2017 and reflects our commitment to transparency, accountability, and the continued improvement of services. Next slide. In FY21, DHS reviewed over 2,000 cases to inform the CUA scorecard. This slide depicts the areas that are evaluated, scored, and ranked in the CUA scorecard. Next slide. Since the baseline CUA scorecard in 2017, all CUAs have shown remarkable improvement. The blue represents FY17 and the yellow represents FY21. And our latest FY21 CUA scorecard shows continued progress. The FY21 CUA scorecard had 3 CUAs achieve a superior rating of 5 bells, 6 CUAs who achieved proficient, which is 4 bells, and 1 CUA achieved a rating of competent, which is 3 bells. Although DHS has some challenges, our IOC community-based model is working. As we have seen significant gains, we are confident that these positive trends will continue. Thank you for this opportunity to review the role of CUAs in our city and the progress that we have made together with the CUAs and our community partners. In closing, I understand that members of the committee may have questions about specific cases. Please understand that under Pennsylvania's Child Protective Services law, I am legally obligated to protect the confidentiality of children and families involved in cases of suspected or confirmed child abuse or neglect. Therefore, I am unable to discuss the specifics of any family's case. However, my team and I are happy to answer any questions related to the system, child welfare practice, or policy. Thank you for your consideration. Final slide.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I also want to thank you for making your executive team available and reflecting the seriousness by which we all take these matters. With that, I'm going to just notify the committee members that if you would like to make a comment or question, please use the chat feature to alert me. I will call upon you based on the order of the response that you make in the chat feature. If for some reason, due to technology or otherwise, that I fail to see your request, please just use your microphone and let me know so that I can recognize you for questions and comments. Let me start by asking my co-chair if she has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to circle back with my questions in one moment.
All right. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to recognize Richard Wexler for questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and thank you, Commissioner Ali, for being here, and even more, thank you for the progress at DHS. Your points about the reduction in numbers, particularly the number of entries, I think are well taken. This is not the agency it was just a few years ago. You and your deputies, and especially the frontline workers and their union, deserve credit for that. So, first of all, you've acknowledged the problems, and the data show you're making real progress. Most of all, I think your leadership has reflected the fact, for the first time at DHS that I know of, a rejection of what I have called the big lie of American child welfare. The false claim that child safety and family preservation are opposites that need to be balanced. On the contrary, family preservation almost always is the safer option, and a system that emphasizes it makes all children safer. Indeed, the tragic events that prompted this meeting took place at a time when DHS was taking away significantly more children than it takes today. So if child removal really equaled child safety, that tragedy and so many others before never should have happened. So now the question becomes, how can we continue the progress? And my first question for you is, you've mentioned a number of initiatives that sound quite promising, but I don't hear any that would involve DHS relinquishing power. There are a lot of proposals for a lighter touch, but the agency still remains in control. That means, to my mind, families still afraid to come forward for help, for fear of encountering, for example, mandated reporters, and times when the agency would not exercise the best possible judgment. Are you prepared to embrace any options that would involve relinquishing some DHS power, and if so, what would those be?
So thank you for that question, Mr. Wexler. And so let me first state this, that we are certainly interested in partnering with, any organization that will help us to continue to improve our progress. That was certainly evident in the partnership that I indicated with the University of Pennsylvania, with Casey Family Programs, with the Center for Study of Social Policy. We believe at DHS that one of the ways in which we can, I wouldn't necessarily say relinquish power, but I will say this: we want to not be a reactionary system. Child welfare is reactionary in that we wait until a report comes in. We need to change that narrative, and that's what me, my team, and the DHS workers and the co-workers are attempting to do. However, as you know, that takes some time. And so how we plan to do that is we want to do more primary prevention, and so that community members, family members, mandated reporters who we want to transform to mandated supporters can call a line, not the DHS hotline, so that we can offer more supports to family upstream. Our data also tells us in that although we get a significant number of reports that come into the DHS hotline, we actually divert 52% of those reports, and we do not accept them for investigation, and we offer prevention services. So we believe that we are starting to make some progress in that, but we know we have a ways to go. But we are certainly interested in having further conversations to determine how we can make further gains in that.
Joyce McMillan, who's a wonderful activist in New York, I know will be pleased that you're using her line about turning mandatory reporters into mandatory supporters. But can mandatory reporters do that if they remain afraid that if they call the alternative line instead of child line, they face any number of potential sanctions? And if so, are there changes you'd like to see the state make to mandated reporting?
So I will say this, that we have been in conversation with our state partners around the mandated reporting training, because part of our entry rate and disproportionality study, we actually have focus groups with mandated reporters. So that included teachers from the School District of Philadelphia, that included counselors and social workers from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, as well as St. Christopher's Hospital, to talk to them about their thoughts around the mandated reporting training. And so we share that information with our state partners. And it's my understanding that the state is looking at that curriculum. However, we don't want to wait. And so as I testified to, part of the entry rate and disproportionality study, in order to educate mandated reporters about our desire to develop the support line and make the mandated supporters, we are looking at revising or supplementing, I should say supplementing and not revising, since the mandated reporting training, as you know, is a state training. We are looking at supplementing the training so that we can offer that training to mandated reporters so that they know. Remember, we want them to call this support line when there are no allegations of physical or sexual abuse, when there is a service need. And that is one of the requests of our mandated reporters, particularly at the School District of Philadelphia, who indicated that they need to know the resources, that oftentimes they call in reports because we operate a 24/7 hotline. And so we always answer the phone, and so they're looking for some immediate help.
Are the people who would be at the other end of that alternative line to call, are they themselves mandated reporters? And are the agencies with whom they would partner to help the family also mandated reporters? Because if the answer is yes, you've still got the problem of people scared to go that route.
So I will say to you, Mr. Wexler, is that we're still in a planning phase. We actually was awarded that grant in September of 2021. We started the planning phase in October 2021. However, so we're still in a planning phase in terms of rolling out what we call the support line. We did intentionally want to use the Philadelphia Phillies CANS line because it is operated by the health department. And so we believe in more of a public health approach to address child welfare. Again, remember, we want to do the primary prevention as opposed to always being reactionary. And so we have not talked about who would man that particular call. What we will say is that we want mandated reporters if there are allegations of physical and sexual abuse. Even if they call the line as mandated reporters, we would have to report that over to Childline, but we're there to offer a resource to any individual that calls. So it's just not mandated reporters. We also want to do a communication campaign so that families can also call and ask for the much needed resources.
One more question, then I'll stop. One of our proposals in our report would be, and this again falls under the category in some ways of relinquishing power, would be Miranda rights for families. Are you prepared to endorse the idea that when your caseworker comes to the door, they explicitly tell families exactly what rights they have? Because of course, if you don't know your rights, you don't have those rights.
So we actually do that, Mr. Wexler, as part of our letter that we leave to the family. So we leave a letter and we also verbally explain to them. We actually says you have certain rights under the law. you have a right to have an attorney present during the interview. And the letter goes on further, but we do provide a notification to families when they are subject of a report.
At what point? In other words, when they show up to the door, is that the first thing they hand the family?
Yes, when they show up to the door.
Okay, and the family is told, look, you don't have to talk to us. Okay, then one last thing. How does that account then for what happened in the case of the late Jennifer Benich, where the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued a 50-page ruling saying, you didn't do any of that. You went in and you barged in that case in a situation where the only allegation was somebody said while she was conducting a protest, they didn't, and her child allegedly was with her, they didn't know if the mother fed the child. I mean, that sounds like anytime somebody goes to a protest, do they have to yell out, hey, everybody, I'm feeding my child now, so you don't need to call DHS on me. That case would seem to reflect none of the lighter touch or due process protections that you mentioned.
Mr. Wexler, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that particular case. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues from the law department who's on here is familiar with that particular case. If not, we can follow up accordingly. But I see Jonathan Huline just came on the screen.
Good morning, everyone. Is it still morning? Yes, it is. Mr. Wexler, good question. You're referring to what we call the YWB case,
yes.
Which came out in December, the Supreme Court decision. And by the way, I think you're making a lot of great points about the kind of touch we have and how that affects the work we do. In terms of that actual case, I actually don't know, and I'm quite positive it's not in the Supreme Court majority decision or any of the decisions about what, quote, warnings were given to the parent in that case, which I think was kind of your initial question here. More generally, what that case is about is probable cause and motions to compel cooperation. And I think the Supreme Court came down in that regard in the right way, even though it was my office that filed the motion to compel cooperation. I have to say we might have gotten it wrong there. There has to be probable cause, and in that case, the Supreme Court did not find that there was probable cause, and of course the actual case had moved down the line at that point, so it's more a legal finding. I don't know if that's helpful or responsive, but I can tell you that.
That's very helpful, but I'm sure, and I very much appreciate that, and I have plenty more questions, but I'm sure tons of other committee members do too, so it's probably time for me to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wexler. I did see hand raised by Miss Yolanda Bryant. Do you have a question, or was that in error? You're on mute. You'll have to unmute. Okay.
Hi to everyone. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Councilman David.
Good morning.
I have some questions for the Commissioner. First of all, I want to know how can even DHS fix DHS? I listened to your whole slide, everything that you said. 2018, actually, I was the case with my grandchildren. I came to you, so it's not like it was said that my case wasn't, looked into. It was a sexual assault with my 5-year-old grandchildren. Another thing, it's so many questions that I do have to say, because one, I feel like y'all violate the privacy of citizens when y'all come to their home. It's not what was said. When you come to someone home, and you saying that they have every right to bring, an attorney there, that's not true. Because when you're trying to call the attorney, you use the police as force to make a family feel threatened. So how do a family supposed to go from there? if a family going through poverty problems or it don't have the money to afford an attorney, and you uses your attorneys that y'all use, which most kids, that's how they stay in the system, because they not looking out. Every attorney is not looking out. If you have the caseload, you have attorneys like Lisa Mother, Lisa Visco. You have all of these attorneys that we have. It shows their caseload is full. You can see it. It's in docket. But still, y'all still give them these cases and say that they overwhelm, instead of providing money that can help for parents to get their own attorneys. So there's so many acts of violations that DHS do to a parent, and how can a parent, a family member, even get their child back? That's for one. I feel like you just read a slide. You read like a fairy tale book that wasn't true. I mean, you can read something, but the facts is there. There's over hundreds of parents, thousands actually, in the city of Philadelphia that's going through these issues. Many have came to myself. Many have came to Councilman David O. Many have people came to you, have even cried out for help. And still their cases is not done. How many cases do you have unfounded, Commissioner, that y'all still haven't let their children go? These are questions that need to be raised the bar, because most of these children that's in the system, their cases was unfounded. Why do y'all even hold the children once the case is unfounded? Doesn't unfounded mean not guilty? That the parent wasn't found? In a regular case court of law, a judge would have to let them go because we don't have nothing on them. So why hold their children? Why make the process be so long? And why do y'all need so much funding? Why do DHS? You said that the mayor created, I actually wrote it down. The mayor created the primary prevention. Y'all just created the primary prevention grant, to help families and stuff. And you said, you just got funding for that. Well, you have funding for that, funding for the Office of Children and Family. That's another DHS, basically. That's a whole nother DHS that's getting funding for. But our children is still suffering. Our families are still suffering. So you can still write this down, but as speaking of a grandmother that's fighting for her grandchildren to stay out the system, that knows that everything that was done wrong, when everything is on video. I have video of police grabbing, not letting you in. I have video of your DHS officer saying if she come and show paperwork of another child, that's not nothing. I've had video showing that my home, it was never in harm or danger. That's on video, but none of this was looked at. So how can you say that y'all look at this stuff and y'all take it into questioning, and you overgoing it, and y'all going to try to change the mandator law as a mandator supporter, when actually that is your DHS workers that's not doing the right things, and it's under the commissioner. That's what they are told by the commissioner. That's what they said. We doing by a handbook. Like I have this paper that that's blank, and if I fill it out and I say, well, these is the laws, and so this is what we going by. But it's not correct. What they doing is not correct. They violating human rights. They violating every right of the law of going in schools, of just a parent should be there present, whether y'all want them there or not. Children be scared. So you cannot just do this. Children lie. Children say things. You could bring a child through and take him away, but a child, you just cannot just take a child without investigating. And that's the most important thing. So my question is, instead of keep getting state funding for everything, because that's what it seemed like y'all need, state funding for everything. When y'all get free grants, y'all get beds, y'all get clothing, y'all get diapers, y'all get billions of dollars for free before the state even give y'all money. And these children still walking around with bags. I see children that's on the run from the terminals, Commissioner, from DHS, that's crying out for help, that's getting murdered in our city. What are you all going to do to change that? What changes are y'all going to do to help these teens that's crying out for help? We had a hearing. These teens were so angry when Councilman David O was speaking. They not even realizing that he is not the enemy. DHS, you are the enemy. Because if you want to protect these children, you will go out and hear what they want to say. You will call on people like me that's crying out for help. You want to see different organizations that's not just in it for no funding, that's in it for the help of the children, to protect the child. Isn't that your job, Commissioner? The well-being of a child, to protect the child?
Absolutely, Ms. Bryant.
So my question is, what are you going to do to help make a difference? And when are y'all going to do it without so much funding? Why do y'all need so much funding when the children are still going through the same, and families are still going through the same things, even poverty issues? A child shouldn't be taken for poverty issues. So I close on my questions for now.
So I will certainly attempt to answer, at least some of the questions. I may need to be more general in terms of Ms. Bryant. So what I will say, Ms. Bryant, is that you are exactly right in that families are fearful. And they're fearful of DHS, they're fearful of Child Protective Services, because they are fearful that their loved one will be taken. This is the reason why we are changing our approach, what I testified to. We know that removing young people from their homes is extremely traumatic, not only for the child, but also for the family. And so in order for a removal to occur, we actually now require DHS social workers to make sure that they conference it with a higher level individual, so either at the administrator or the directive level, so that a decision can be made whether or not that young person has to be moved from their home. Can we put in a safety plan, if you will, to keep that young person in his or her home? If that answer is no, and that we cannot do a safety plan, that this child will continue to be unsafe, then we consult with our law department in reference to that, and then we consult with the courts as well. And so that's the decision that's made when a young person is removed from their home. Again, extremely traumatic. So traumatic, the reason why we focus on kinship care and placing young people with someone that they know, or someone with or a family member, or someone that the family knows, so that it can reduce the trauma that young people suffer. That's a separate track than what you also indicated in terms of poverty. Again, this is really the support line. We want to separate willful neglect versus poverty. And so we want to walk alongside families, in addition with our other city departments, so that we can offer resources to family in-home services. I testified that in any given day, as of today, the CUAs are servicing 2,000 children in their own homes, providing in-home services, and that we also diverted over 5,000 children from the DHS hotline. We have begun the transformation, but it will take time.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Bryant. Does any other member of the special committee have a comment or question?
Just one more?
Yes.
If I may? Okay, thank you. If this, as I said at the outset, there's been some real progress here, you're trying to make more. As you know, no system can prevent every horrific tragedy. I mentioned before that the one we're talking about now occurred when Philadelphia was taking away many more children. The only acceptable goal for such tragedies is zero, but our reach will always exceed our grasp. There will be others. And I think it's pretty clear If DHS continues to move in this better direction, a direction that in fact makes all children safer, nevertheless, when the next horrible tragedy happens, because no place has stopped them all, there will be a backlash. People will come out from the woodwork, I think we even know who some of them are, and wag their fingers and say, see, this wouldn't have happened if you were still doing what you used to do and taking all those kids, forgetting that these things happened when you were taking all these kids. Can you tell us now that you're ready for that and will stand up to that backlash and will stay the course?
Absolutely, Mr. Wexler. Excellent question. And really, that's why we need partners, right? So we need partners at the table. It's not enough for me as the DHS commissioner to stay the course. I will continue to stay the course because this is the right thing to do for children, youth, and families. However, I also need my other city counterparts and stakeholders to also support me in that. I need advocates to support me in that. I need the courts to support me in that. Multiple stakeholders, because we are concerned, but our data has proven that we didn't resort back to that. We are concerned that when there is a high profile case, if you will, that is in the paper, in public, that then we will get you. I know you heard about placement panic. We don't ever want to go back to placement panic. And this is why we put systems in place so that there is a higher level of approval in terms of order of protective custody, as well as our consultations with the law department, as well as the court before the removals. I also want to say this as well. We also embarked on this initiative called Family Engagement Initiative that is in concert with the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, as well as our Philadelphia Family Courts, in which we're also trying to transform how we engage families. And so there's three components. There is revised family finding that says not only do you, county worker, should identify relatives and kin for young people and families, but also advocates, so parent advocates, child advocates, recognizing again that individuals are fearful of DHS. Parent advocates may have a better relationship with their client and can get more of the information, again, to reduce the trauma of young people. The other strategy is these crisis rapid response meetings. Before a removal, let's get the family together, their support system together, so that we can come up with a plan before a removal. And the third component is enhanced legal representation. And so those are the three components. We actually embarked on that journey in February of 2020. The pandemic hit. We had to take a little sunset. However, we have been fully implemented, the whole CUA system as well as DHS and the court system as of December of 2021. So we are looking forward to the progress around the Family Engagement Initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have some questions. Let me just start with some statements I read in the paper. Oh, I'm sorry. I just see that our sheriff has questions. Sheriff Bilal, why don't you go ahead?
Good morning, Commissioner, and thank you for coming on and bringing the information. First of all, I want to say thank you for the work that you are doing, moving DHS forward and learning from what has happened in the past. I appreciate the programs that you are implementing, and if you need my support, I want to make sure that you reach out to us, and if we can do anything to help you, and then I just want to say thank you, because I hear what you're saying, and I know what has happened in the past, because in my family, way before you, we went through that situation with DHS. And so what I'm hearing today is moving it forward is a great idea, and I want to thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you for that, Sheriff Bilal.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. All right. So I'm going to start by reading a couple of statements that were made in the paper. So I can't say that they actually made them, but they're reported in the paper. Nancy Winkler, an attorney who is the plaintiff's attorney in several cases, stated staff turnover and lack of training allowed red flags to be ignored. And this is in reference to the Turning Points for Children matter. Frank Zervone, executive director of Support Center for Child Advocates, said a revolving door of case managers often means no permanent person is attached to a case, which can lead to mistakes. There is the top, which is you, and I'm very encouraged and so pleased to hear your statements, which I will say is different than what I've heard in the past, so I certainly thank you for that. I thank you for your leadership, in this new direction. There is what you say from the top, then there's a question of does it filter down to the bottom? A question of how it's supposed to work versus how does it work? Clearly, you are providing information and a direction, acknowledging, the challenges that you have, the obstacles you have to overcome. But unlike other organizations that have to filter down their message, get past cultural muscle memory, ways of doing things, you also have to manage 10 community umbrella agencies that then coordinate other providers, which seems to be certainly a very difficult task. What Ms. Bryant is talking about in her comments and question, I believe, is the difference between the theoretical workings, the aspiration, versus the reality. And we have looked at many cases where people have presented evidence that verified what they were saying is true, and some who are continuing, or actually most of whom are continuing under these challenges. For example, someone who has two brothers as foster children, those are her nephews, but is denied the sister. The sister would be joined with the brothers, but cannot be approved as a foster care provider for her niece to join the sister with her brothers, but is then asked to be a foster care provider for yet another child. In the case of Miss Bryant, I did see the videotapes. There was no notification of her rights. There were uniformed police officers in the middle of the afternoon, and there was a paper that they claimed was a court order that was not. That is on videotape and other things. This I understand is not something you would have direct knowledge of. This is, the operation, and quite frankly, this took place before you were commissioner. We did go through many of these cases, and certainly I appreciate that you're addressing that we would like to have a better system. My question directly relating to the Turning Points situation. So many of the points of contact with children and families are through CUA agencies or other providers. Is there a minimum qualification their staff has to have? In other words, do they have to have a degree in social work? Do they have to have a certificate, or can they be a high school graduate without any training in social work and be hired to go interact with families when an allegation or a concern or anything comes through in terms of being caseworkers? Is that something that there are some minimum qualifications for?
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilmember O. In terms of CUA case managers, so CUA case managers, CUA supervisors, and all levels of the CUA staff who are case carrying staff do have to have, at the minimum, the CUA case managers have to have a bachelor's degree. So a bachelor's degree in social work or a related field. When we say related field, sometimes it's human services, sometimes it's sociology or psychology. And so, yes, that is comparable to a DHS social worker as well, bachelor's level in social worker or related field. In terms of the COA case manager supervisors, comparable to a DHS supervisor, they have to have a master's degree. So a master's degree in social work or a related field. And so the expectations for a DHS social worker and a COA social worker in terms of their degrees is similar. In terms of the training for DHS and COA case managers, the training is also the same. There is a statewide curriculum in which all DHS social workers, all COA case managers, social workers, and supervisors have to be certified as direct services workers. This is 120 hours versus 120 hours worth of training. That training actually occurs by our DHS University. And so I have master's level supervisors who provide training to both the COA case managers as well as the DHS staff. So the curriculum is the same. And when I say the 120 hours, that is just 120 hours of the statewide training. We also do some supplemental trainings around court simulation, for example, in which we have a mock court hearing so that DHS and COA staff know how to present themselves in court. Any initiative that comes down the pike, family engagement initiative that I spoke about, that also is additional training on substance abuse, training on sex abuse, and so there's also additional training. So they get the initial 120 hours worth of training, and then every year, DHS social workers, supervisors, COA social workers, and supervisors also have to have a minimum of at least 20 hours of additional training each year.
So that's how it's supposed to work. Maybe it does work that way. Do you have a process to verify that, in fact, a provider actually does that every person that is interacting with a family is so credentialed?
Absolutely. And so as I indicated, COA case managers, we do the training. That training, so in order to be certified, that certification goes to DHS University because we verify that this particular employee completed all of their 120 hours worth of training. There's a certificate that comes of completion that the COA case manager receives after each training. We keep a database in order to monitor that, and then we communicate with the state, and the state actually does the actual certification. So yes, every COA case manager, every DHS social worker and above are certified, and I can verify that.
Okay. So in the newspaper article, once again, this is hearsay. I don't know to be true, but this is what I read. Last annual evaluation, DHS ranked 9 out of 10 COAs unsatisfactory or critical when it came to staff retention. And the theme of staff retention appears, kind of throughout these articles. The issue of burnout, of lack of training, overburdened, overwhelmed, difficulty to retain staff by COAs. I don't know, and I don't think that's true of DHS itself, but it seems to be true of COAs. Is that 9 out of 10 COAs have this kind of problem with staff retention? Is that accurate? Is that something that is really something related to the COAs? In other words, it's not something that DHS itself is having a problem with, or is it?
So thanks for that question. And so I will speak to the latest COA scorecard. So the latest COA scorecard from FY21, again, that is our transparent document in terms of how COAs are performing. In terms of the workforce, so you're referring to workforce, we had 4 COAs who were ranked either competent, so 3 bells and above, and then we had the remaining 6 COAs were ranked either unsatisfactory or critical. I will say this, I do not believe that is unique to the COA system. it is indicative of child welfare. Unfortunately, I testify that child welfare is very, very difficult work. Hence the reason why we want to clarify the roles and responsibilities while we move to IOC so that DHS can focus on investigations and the CUAs can focus on providing ongoing case management services. That's one of the reasons why we moved to that particular model. And so not only is child welfare in terms of the turnover rate, so the national turnover rate for child welfare is about 30%. Which is not good because the work is so hard and so critical. And so what we have done, because we are laser focused on making sure that we have a workforce that we could onboard and also retain, is that we did develop a work group in order to look at some strategies around how do you retain staff, in particular community umbrella agency staff and provider staff. And so some of the strategies that we came up with was certainly making sure that there is a work-life balance. So work-life balance, making sure that the CUAs had the infrastructure so that they're more of a support to their staff. Also, we meet with CUA leadership regularly in order to review their strategies. We actually have practice coaches and senior learning specialists who work alongside their DHS staff, who work alongside the CUA case managers to do some mentoring, but also do transfer of knowledge, because as you talked about the training, yes, you can get trained, but it really is about how do you transfer that knowledge and make sure that it plays out on the ground level. We did sign some MOUs or memorandums of understanding with universities so that we can begin to strengthen our recruitment of CUA case managers, as well as some tuition reimbursement. We looked at their salaries. Helping professionals, the salaries are sometimes low. And then we also did some sign-on bonuses as well and incentives. So workforce and workforce retention is certainly a priority of myself as well as my team.
Thank you very much. One of the complaints that I have received from former CUA workers is that they felt very much if they did something or said something that that was not something their employer liked, they could easily be fired. In terms of DHS workers, I believe they are part of I know they're part of a collective bargaining unit, and they have an ability to go to the inspector general and other means to, protect themselves if they are, for example, in disagreement with their supervisors, or if they feel pressure to do something they don't think they should. In terms of the CUA workers themselves, I don't believe they are part of any collective bargaining agreement. And, I wonder, I suppose there is no influence that DHS has in terms of salary and benefits or employee protection when it comes to whistleblower or things like that for CUA workers.
So that would be the individual provider or the individual
Yes.
responsibility. However, we do have a commissioner action response office, and we do get complaints from CUA case managers that will complain. We do protect them in terms of anonymity when they do make a report, and then we investigate accordingly. And so we do that. In terms of the salaries that you indicated, so we do provide guidance to the CUAs in terms of salary ranges to make sure that the salaries are also consistent with DHS salaries.
But they don't have to follow those guidelines, and they don't report to you like what their salaries are.
So they do. So they provide a monthly invoice to the department, and so you can see the salary of their employees. So they do report that on a monthly basis.
On average, are they comparable to DHS workers, or are they below DHS workers?
They're comparable to DHS workers.
Okay. All right. At this time, that concludes my questions. I see that my co-chair, I believe, has questions.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you, Ms. Ali, Commissioner, for all of your hard work in this very difficult area. But I just want to follow up on Councilman O's line of questioning, and I think I mentioned this during the budget hearings that we had a few weeks ago. And I guess the first thing I wanted to say is that DHS, as we know, is just really a massive system. It's pretty big. We spend a lot of money in DHS, and but it's a really big system. And so that with any big system, there's going to be errors, there's going to be issues, and it was massive before we went to a KUA system, and there were errors. And so one would think that obviously the next logical step would be, the errors continue, and in my opinion have likely been multiplied. I heard Councilman O ask about salaries. I know you said that they were comparable, but going to a KUA system was a cost saving measure by the city of Philadelphia. It really, in my opinion, didn't take into account the needs of this vulnerable population, but it was a cost saver. I saw you shake your head. No, you disagree with that?
I do, Councilwoman Bass, that it was not a cost saver. That's not the reason why we moved to the KUA system.
Why did we move to a KUA system then?
Yeah, we moved to the KUA system as I testified to the Child Welfare Review Panel that was put in place by former Mayor Street came up with 37 recommendations about DHS in the state of child welfare. And so we implemented at that particular time 35 of the recommendations. The two remaining recommendations, which was the impetus to the KUA system or improving outcomes for children, was that we needed to be more of a presence in the community. That was one. They actually recommended that we just put one office in a high risk area, but as we have testified to, and is that the city of Philadelphia is high risk in general, particularly around when you think about poverty. And then the second recommendation was around our blurred roles. Prior to improving outcomes for children, there were 2 case managers that was assigned to the families. So we always had provider social workers. And so families had a provider social worker, and they also had a DHS social worker. And so what was happening is that there were competing information, oftentimes conflicting information. The families were given multiple plans and had questions about what plan to follow. And so those were the reasons why we moved to IOC, not as a cost saver.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then. Is it not true then that the city didn't save money? Did the city save money?
No, the city didn't save money. And if you want more specifics, I do have the CFO. So the city didn't save any money as a result of moving to improving outcomes for children.
Okay. So, but when you say moving to improving outcomes for children, you mean essentially moving to the KUA system?
Yeah. Yes, the framework.
Okay. All right.
IEC, the KUAs are who delivers.
Okay. Let me ask you, so improving outcomes for children, or as I call it, the KUA system, was brought here by a former commissioner. Is that accurate? Or was that, is that not accurate?
Yes. No, it was a former commissioner at the time who introduced improving outcomes for children based on really stakeholders. So stakeholder engagement, looking at other systems. So yes.
So when the former commissioner brought the program here, is it accurate that this former commissioner then went to work for the national organization that was pushing this program? Is that accurate?
So I'm not sure what national organization was pushing the program.
I heard it was the Casey Foundation. Is that accurate?
I will tell you my recollection. I was operations director at the time. I would not say. I in all of my conversations that Casey Family Programs was pushing, moving to improving outcomes for children because it was based on the Child Welfare Review Panel and the recommendations, particularly around the blurred roles and responsibilities and being a present in the community. So it's my understanding that members of the Child Welfare Review Panel in those recommendations, as well as the meeting with over 150 stakeholders, this is how Improving Outcomes for Children was born, the CUA system.
Okay, but okay, because it's recently been brought to light that or and I don't know, actually I shouldn't say it's brought to light because I don't know this to be factual, so that's why I'm asking on the record if the former commissioner who introduced the city of Philadelphia to improving outcomes for children then went to become employed by the very supporters of improving outcomes for children that have been working to move this model into not just Philadelphia, but into other cities as well. So you're saying you don't know? You're saying
I don't know. My recollection is that there was not one individual or one organization that was pushing improving outcomes for children. So I will say that I had the opportunity to chair at the particular time. I was operations director, and so I chaired the practice work group that consisted of providers, union leadership, family members, and so our charge was really around crafting and developing a model that will address a community presence and will address the blurred roles and responsibilities. So that's why I kept saying I don't, in terms of one entity pushing the improvement outcomes for children, at least at my level and all of my leading of the work group, it wasn't one entity.
Okay. But Annie Casey was involved in, they were one of the agencies.
Casey Family Programs and Annie E. Casey.
Okay, so they were active in working with the city to bring the program in. Okay, all right. So so we'll follow up on that and try to get some clarity, because I do think if what we've been alerted to is accurate, then that's quite troublesome. That a program could have been brought in by a commissioner who later was employed. It's almost like lobbying. It's like a little fox in the hen house sort of situation. But I would like to get more further information before we make accusations, because we don't want to do anything that's or say anything that's incorrect or improper. I wanted to go back really quickly to what we invest for IOC and what we've invested before that with the CUA system. And I don't know that you have, or before that, prior to the CUA system. I don't know that you have these numbers with you, but I'll tell you what I'd like to know, and if you could get that to myself and my co-chair, that would be great. I'd like to know how much what your budget has been prior to the CUA system, which came in what year? What year did we implement? 2013, 14?
Yes, implemented. The first CUA stood up in 2013.
13, okay. So then we've got 9 years of history in terms of how much we spent on CUAs. I'd like the prior 9 years before that to see exactly how much we spent on DHS operations from the budget that we have here in the city of Philadelphia. If you could compile those numbers, so just so we could see comparatively what we spent. Also, if you could give us some sense of how much or how many children were in that network over all of those years. Okay, so I think that those details are important. If you could get that to us, I think that would help us to, just be better aware of exactly how much we're spending, what we're spending it on, and I'm just not convinced that we're not spending less, that we're spending more. But you'll gather the numbers and you will let us know.
Sure, Councilman.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's my question. That's my question for right now, and I will come back. I'll have additional questions. You'll be here throughout the hearing?
I will.
Yes, thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I'm just going to follow up on something my co-chairs kind of raised, and I'll put it this way in terms of my opinion and thoughts on it, and really just for your response. You are frozen, so that
Councilmember O, you froze for a minute.
okay. There you are.
You're frozen, Councilmember O.
Okay, am I okay now?
We both were frozen, I guess.
Yeah, you know
You're
what
frozen
happens
again.
when you freeze, I freeze. So I don't know which one of us is frozen, but one of us.
And we're both
Okay.
in the office.
Yeah, I know this Wi-Fi here. So this is a question in the form of an opinion, and I believe this predates your commissionership. According to the newspaper, in the case that we're at the center of our resolution, three young girls with a history, I assume a known history of physical and sexual abuse, 4-year history, returned to the father who continued this physical and sexual abuse in very expanded ways. It appears that there were 5 caseworkers and 2 supervisors, but that because of turnover and loss of continuity, that somehow the history and understanding of what was going on with these girls was lost. It was disjointed until the point where 2 of the sisters were returned to the father, and then a third sister was then placed again with the father, where they were abused for another year. And what I wonder in relationship to this conversation is the good intention and the good theory of being grassroots becoming very broad versus very narrow. And somewhere along the line, Sandusky creating state legislative mandates that required DHS and social workers to undertake certain type of actions, but made it very broad. And I might be quoting Richard Wexler: when you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you don't want to make the haystack bigger and bigger. So in a sense, more money may have been spent on the bigger haystack, but less money on dealing with the needle. In other words, focused on those cases where there's substantiated evidence of reasonable suspicion or evidence of actual abuse versus rumors, allegations, speculation, a mandated reporter who doesn't want to lose their job, so they report everything. You know, in my conversations with your predecessor, I was told that the policy is more is better, and that gut feelings are a basis for reporting. And I have heard that, in looking at the system, and the justification was more is better. Better to be safe than sorry. What I countered was, threatening people's livelihoods so that they should pull the fire alarm just to be sure that they don't lose their job means that we have overburdened the system systemically. And so the more that we investigate needlessly, the more we put children at risk, the more money we put into it, the less money we're putting into those social workers, DHS workers, who probably, I think you'll agree, are underpaid, who probably are overworked, who probably find, their jobs very, very stressful. And, so much time spent on things that are not fruitful in actually helping to protect children and repair families and help families in need get through poverty. Broad versus narrow. And some of that, of course, is the state legislature and kind of a reaction to Sandusky, things like that. But it seems we have a system from what I understand, a complaint on Childline mandates an investigation. There is some difference between Child Protective Services and General Protective Services when it comes to complaints. Mandated reporters who believe that they shouldn't report something, but they don't want to be second guessed 12 months later and be put in a rubber room or in the school district or being taken out of being a nurse or a doctor. And a system where even if a doctor and a nurse determine that there is no reason to report, a social worker can just simply report. There's no consensus. There's no process. It's a system designed to encourage reporting, but that reporting ultimately sometimes mandates that DHS go out and investigate and runs the system thin. It just seems that in this case of Turning Points for Children, that shockingly, 3 sisters with a known history of being horrific victims of sexual and physical abuse in ways that are inhuman. A history. They are returned despite a judge's order requiring a psychological evaluation. No real place for them to go with this person. Criminal record and open case. In a case like that, what is the explanation that you might surmise, not in that particular case, but in cases like that? What went wrong, and how can that be addressed, Commissioner?
So thanks for that question, Councilmember O. And certainly my questions will be more general, as you know, I am bound by confidentiality law, so it will be more, more general. And so the first thing that I will say to you, as you refer to Jerry Sandusky and the changes to the Child Protective Services law, as I indicated, we had a tremendous impact on the number of reports that came into our hotline and the number of investigations in 2015. So much so that we had to look at our infrastructure, and then we also had to look at our continuum. And so in 2017, we actually created what we refer to as field screening units on the hotline, so that when there were General Protective Services reports, we can actually take a second look at those reports, because we know that oftentimes General Protective Services reports refer to a service need, right, for families. The Child Protective Services reports, because there are allegations of physical abuse and sexual abuse, we would certainly review those reports just to make sure it was consistent with the law, but more often than not, those reports were accepted, and they were transferred to our investigation unit for full investigations. Not Child Protective Services reports. And so what we do is we actually will dispatch a worker from our hotline to make an assessment of the family, as opposed to an investigation to determine what is the service need. If there is no service need, we close it right there on the hotline. If there's a service need, then we transition it over to our prevention services. As I indicated earlier, as part of my testimony, we actually, so the reports that come into the DHS hotline, we actually screen out 52% of those reports that come into our hotline, which certainly tells us that A, there needs to be some more education in terms of the reports that come into, our hotline, and B, that there is a service need for families. So I'll first start with that. That creating that infrastructure, but also creating the continuum of services on the prevention arm so that we can prevent further penetration to the child welfare system, was actually key to making sure that DHS social workers weren't overburdened. If you can imagine, from 2015, when the investigations skyrocketed and the number of reports to the hotline, up until 2017, the system was overburdened. And so that's why we had to look at the infrastructure as well as the resources. In terms of how do you address things in the future. I would say a few things. The first thing that I would say is that you need a stable and skilled and trained workforce. And so I talked about their training. I also talked about some of the transfer learning that both practice coaches and senior learning specialists, seasoned DHS employees, do with the KUA staff. I also will say that we have to create a situation in which young people feel that they can trust at least someone, right? So even one adult. So the power of one, we talk about trusting one adult so that there can be some disclosures if there is, physical or sexual abuse, so that the abuse won't continue to occur. That's another thing that we had to look at. And we had to look at enhancing some of our, training. What does it look like to continue to assess the safety of young people, even when they don't make a disclosure because of fear of making that disclosure? So those are some of the things that we put in place.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I see that Nadeem Bezar would like to make a comment, followed by a council member Bass, co-chair. She would like to have one more question. Mr. Bezar?
Thank you, Councilman. Good morning. I think we're still morning, another 11 minutes. Good morning, Commissioner Ali. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
It's good to see you. I'm going to make a few comments. First of all, I want to congratulate you, Commissioner, and not for necessarily the reasons that you might think, but more for some of the questions that you've had to address. You've had to answer questions on economic questions, the economy, salary, training, not just of DHS social workers and case managers, but KUA social workers and case managers, the curriculum required for those case managers, their educational background. You've had to answer questions with regard to mandated reporters and downstream reporting requirements. I think Mr. Wexler, I won't use the word grilled, but I think I might have just used the word grilled you a bit on that. You've had to answer questions about Childline, basically the entire KUA system. I think I heard Sandusky mentioned. I've heard hotline calls mentioned. And you've also had to answer questions about the minutia of how KUA's handled a particular matter, despite being under the constraints that I am familiar with regard to confidentiality. That being said, I am mindful of the name of this committee dealing with child separation in Philadelphia. So I applaud the decrease in the number of children that have entered placement. The maybe also converse of that, or what that means is that there's less family separation with the number of kids. One, decrease in the number of kids entering the system or placement, and two, the increase in the number of children that are being placed with kin. So I applaud you and your team on that effort. I think it's wonderful, but I think we can still strive, or perhaps all of us can strive to see that number improve. I guess I would not strive, I would just watch. With that said, what is the plan for the future to continue to improve those numbers? Possibly one in decreasing the number of, so I'm going to ask the question and then I'm going to make some suggestions. One, decreasing the number of children that are separated from their families, and two, increasing the number of staffing or people so that the proportionality of cases that an individual handles might decrease so that they could improve the quality of care provided. So I thank you and I lob that question. I will not ask for your expertise in any other category, as you have certainly been questioned on that in about a dozen different categories.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And so our goal is really to stay the course. We put in the infrastructure in order to support families. So we put that infrastructure on the front end. We also have that infrastructure built into our intake and investigation, so they can also divert families from the formal child welfare system. And we built it in on the back end, in that if a family is receiving in-home services or placement services, they can also use our prevention services to keep the stabilization. And so we'll continue on that course. We also want to continue implementing and planning on our support line, again, so that we can offer primary prevention services. This requires us to have a coordinated and integrated approach with other city departments. And so at the table with us is the Department of Behavioral Health, Community Behavioral Health, Office of Homeless Services. We also have the Community Economic Office. We also have our Commerce Department, because we realize that we need to also help families improve the quality of their situation, because poverty is so high in the city of Philadelphia. The other thing that I will say is really our journey around disproportionality. We could not look at the entries into the child welfare system without taking a look at the disproportionality and the overrepresentation of Black children in the child welfare system. We know a lot of this is as a result of disinvestment in communities. Again, this is why the reason why we have this a community-based approach, but also because we didn't have resources readily available in order to offer prevention services upstream. The other thing that I testify to is really around looking at our internal policies. So we have to look at our internal policies and our processes to determine if they have an anti-racist lens. And so we have the expertise of the Center for Study of Social Policies, because if we're not getting it right, we want to get it right. So that means assessing our policies and rewriting our policies and making sure that the policies are actually being operationalized on the ground level by our DHS as well as our CUA staff. The other thing that I will make reference to again is really around our family engagement initiative, getting ahead of the removal. So getting ahead of the separation by way of crisis rapid response meetings in order so that the family can come together and they can develop a plan in order to keep young people in their home and keep the services in the home with the young person. In terms of the workforce, which is very challenging, as I talked about nationally, in terms of child welfare workforce, our goal is to continue to help CUAs recruit. So recruit on board, make sure that we continue to look at the workload to make it easier for CUAs to be able to provide quality services, as well as DHS staff. Our ratio as it stands in terms of CUA case managers is 10 families to 1. So we actually fund a 10-to-1 ratio because we recognize the complexity of families as our system shrinks. We know that we are getting families that may be more at need, and so we want to make sure that there's also a manageable workload. So I hope that answers your questions, but we will certainly stay the course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, let me ask my co-chair, do you have an additional question?
Thank you. Yes, I do have one additional question. Actually, it might be just a little bit more than one question. But I wanted to go back to CUAs and ask about oversight for CUA's budgets. Do you review the budget of CUAs that we've contracted with in the city?
We do. So we review the budgets of CUAs, and we also perform audits of the CUA budgets as well. So yes, all the CUA.
How often do we audit?
I will ask the CFO, Nadine Parisi, to answer that question.
Okay.
Sure. Good morning, council member. My name is Nadine Parisi. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the department. We do a thorough review, and we meet with the CUAs regularly to discuss any financial matters that come up. So annually, we perform an audit. We also do random sample testing of invoices throughout the year. And then we do at least 2 budget reviews throughout the year. We do one at the very beginning before conformance, and then we'll do another budget review when they're making any changes to the budget.
Okay. Okay. So Do KUAs make profits? Are they nonprofit organizations?
They're all nonprofit organizations.
Okay. So there is no profit margin, so to speak, of
No, and
within.
we review all
So
the.
everything's expended down. So do we have in place parameters in terms of what what salary should be, what executive director salary should be, what salaries for or what expenses should be for various supplies, materials, office space, things like that. So if you, as you do your audit, if something stood out, you would see it and you would know, correct?
That's correct. So what I
Okay.
would say to that is we're not overly prescriptive. Everyone has a different cost of doing business, and that's pretty much how we are with all of our providers. But we do a review to make sure that they're, all of the costs are allowable and to make sure that they make sense, that they're allocable to the actual contract. So we do work very closely with the KUAs, especially the KUAs, because, I mean, all of our providers, but especially the KUAs because of the just the magnitude of these contracts.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay. At this time, I will let the commissioner know that we have completed our questions. Thank you so much for bearing with us throughout this process. I again remind the public and everybody else that this resolution centers around KUAs, in particular, because of what was reported in the newspaper about three sisters being returned to a abusive father. Though the settlement is confidential and there are restrictions on talking about the details of the case, we are looking at the questions around the oversight and how the system can be improved and how it's managed. We certainly have learned a lot from the commissioner, and so I thank you, and I'll ask the clerk to call the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next panel was allotted for Turning Points for Children. I do not believe there is a representative present, and I do not have a statement to read on their behalf.
Okay, for the record, we have had discussions around Turning Point providing a witness. We were asked to set back this hearing 30 days to allow them time to prepare. And it appears there's no witness. I did receive a text this morning that they would send a written statement, but we have not received a written statement. If we receive it anytime before the end of this hearing, we will read it into the record. With that, clerk, could you call the next panel?
The next panel set to testify is Pat Albright and David Crane.
Thank you. Let me ask, is Pat Albright and David Crane available on this a virtual hearing?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Ms. Albright?
Hello?
And is that David Crane?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Crane. Let me do this. Why don't we hear from Pat Albright first, then David Crane, and then I will open it up for any questions. Please state your name and then proceed with your testimony, Ms. Albright.
Well, thank you. And again, my name is Pat Albright. I'm here today to put forward a statement from Give Us Back Our Children Philadelphia. And Give Us Back Our Children is a group of mothers, grandmothers, and other family members and supporters formed in 2006 to work together to fight unjust removals of children and to change DHS policies and practices which led to those removals. We work with our sister group in Los Angeles and are part of an international support, not separation network. When KUAs were instituted in 2015, we feared they would amount to a privatization of child welfare services where there would be even less accountability to the public than DHS had. They would increase connections with the police and thus criminalization. They would build the child welfare industry, or the child welfare industrial complex, as some call it, dishing out millions of dollars to agencies and increasing the financial incentive to take and keep children. Turning Point for Children alone now gets $54 million, we understand. And and they would do little, or the CUAs would do little or nothing to lower removal rates, especially among Black children who are overwhelmingly, as we've been saying, and disproportionately in the system. Unfortunately, our fears on all those scores were founded. The recent case of the Turning Points for Children settling a $6 million lawsuit for putting three girls back with their abusive father, and DHS knowing nothing about it, is but one extreme example. That case also throws light on the institutional racism inherent in DHS, an agency they contract with, to believe abusive fathers and disbelieve mothers and children who are the victims of their violence, and to prioritize fathers' rights over both children and mothers. What about protecting mothers' and children's right not to be abused? Implementing two key recommendations from the Special Committee on Child Separations are key to addressing that. One, there should be no removal of children from victims of domestic violence. And two, the expressed wishes of the child must be prioritized over the professional's determination of the quote-unquote best interests of the child. We fully support those recommendations and would add to the first: remove the perpetrator from the home, not the mother and children. But whether it is Turning Point or other CUAs or DHS, the basic problem of arbitrary, unwarranted, and unjust removals will continue without implementation of the recommendations from the Special Committee. Important recommendations also include no removal at birth because of past history with DHS or a positive drug test, abolition of mandatory reporting, Miranda rights for families, the right to good legal representation, and open the courts. But the key recommendations to us are: neglect should be removed from the state law defining child abuse and should no longer be subject to CPS investigations, and any family condition that can be remedied through the provision of concrete help, including but not limited to direct cash assistance, food, clothing, housing assistance, and or childcare, should not constitute neglect and shall not be cause for a CPS or GPS investigation. To that, we would add, DHS and contracting agencies must provide that concrete help, not remove children or impose unhelpful parenting and anger management classes. Within that recommendation that really unpacks poverty from neglect, direct cash assistance is key. Poverty, along with racism, sexism, and disability discrimination, is a main driver of removals, and cash in the hands of mothers and primary caregivers for the critical work of raising children and caring for others is a main remedy against removals and the main way to drive down the removal rates. Direct-to-cash assistance gives mothers the power to provide what their children need and refuse intervention and surveillance. It would protect the crucial and fundamental bond between mother and child, including that of breastfeeding, which gets violently shattered, as Professor Dorothy Roberts describes in her book, Shattered Bonds, The Color of Child Welfare. Some forms of direct cash assistance that we ask City Council and all to prioritize include Then reinstating the child tax credit without any cuts or work requirements imposed. We are already working, and every mother is a working mother. And these payments must go directly to the mother, as the family allowance does in other countries. Also adding tax credits for unpaid family caregivers caring for elders, such as is proposed in the Worker Relief and Credit Reform Act. And so it's caring for children and elders and others, such as proposed in the Worker Relief and Credit Reform Act in Congress, which redefines work to include that of caregiving. Establishing a guaranteed income payment for caregivers, and supporting House Bill 2015 and Senate Bill 918 in Harrisburg that would increase TANF welfare payments in Pennsylvania for the first time since 1990. Currently, a mother of two receives $403 a month. When welfare was cut and time limits and work requirements imposed, the child welfare budget nationally increased 20,000%. The money went from mothers raising children to agencies to take children. In Governor Wolf's current budget, the amount allocated for cash assistance was decreased, while that going for child care was increased when both are needed, and there is a budget surplus. And also there has to be a stop to taking SSI and other payments to families, other payments families receive when children are removed. We urge City Council to reactivate the Anti-Poverty Action Plan, which included TANF benefit level increases, reinstatement of the general assistance, and other much-needed resources. Thank you for this chance to testify. Take away our poverty, not our children.
Thank you very much, Ms. Albright. I'll ask Mr. Crane to identify himself and then provide his testimony for the record.
Good afternoon now. My name is David Crane. I'm a 16-year shop steward with ASME Local 2187. Part of that is that we represent the first line workers at DHS. I have had direct experience working with the community umbrella agencies from their inception to current day. The CUAs have not been able to support or represent Philadelphia's neediest children and families. Contracting out completely of ongoing services has not worked for any county where it has been implemented. There are examples of attempts in Florida and Illinois, and they have eventually gone back to county workers due to failures on many different levels. CUAs are unable to take reports, complete investigations, or place children out of home care for the initial time due to state laws. It has appeared that because of this, CUA has no incentive to prevent placement or to work to mitigate the need for reports of child abuse or neglect. I have been a county worker and witnessed firsthand some CUA staff completely ignore the families or children which they have put any effort for the need, which had they put any effort out, the need for placement could have been prevented. Previously, when DHS was providing ongoing services in a family's home, they were responsible for every child to the mother or caregiver in the household, and also often had to initially visit other children out of the household. CUA is currently only required to see the child that they are quote-unquote active on, meaning that during a home visit, CUA does not have to check on the safety of the other children in the house. CUA was initially presented as being able to find more available placements locally for children and build stronger community ties in their respective communities. To date, it would appear that available placements are shrinking and more children are spending nights in the DHS childcare room. Prior to CUA implementation, it was rare that children had to spend the night in the DHS childcare room. Currently, it is expected that multiple youth spend the night in the DHS childcare room, which is in an office building with rarely enough cots for the children to sleep on, and overnight, and only one staff member to watch the children. KUA staff are only asked to watch their children only when the child has been a complete disruption. There have been issues with other state agencies that have not recognized the KUAs, such as correctional facilities and the Department of Public Welfare will request letters from DHS, since Philadelphia is the only county to contract out completely ongoing services, and other state-run agencies are not aware of this dynamic. There have been ongoing issues with a lack of one chain of command to deal with important issues. Currently, DHS needs KUA management approval to seek a court order to place a child that is active with KUA. In the evening and early mornings, this becomes difficult to be able to reach KUA management. Often makes it difficult to follow court orders. Youth become frustrated with the wait time at the DHS child care room and will AWOL. And some of the youth are already involved in sex trafficking and other risky behaviors. The lack of one chain of command also makes it difficult for families to seek assistance and help when they are not satisfied with their services. KUA has had a high turnover rate of staff even prior to COVID. Families will call into DHS thinking that KUA is at the DHS building and somehow DHS can get in touch with KUA staff faster, which is often not the case. Families then become frustrated and do not believe in the process and often lose out on different services and opportunities for services, since there's not one chain of command, and even when there is communication, there is not an agreement between managements. I hope that council can take a deeper look at these issues, since federal law requires children and youth to look to adoption when children are in placement for 15 of the next 22 months. That, in reality, is a very short time window for families, and we should not risk ending families because some prefer a contracting out method that has clearly not been successful. And thank you for my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crane. First, let me open it up to my colleagues, starting with my co-chair, Councilmember Bass. If there are any questions or comments directed towards this panel.
I just wanted to thank the panel for their testimony today. It's really important information. I want to thank these folks for being here because they're really out on the ground. It's the boots on the ground that we need that can really give us a lot of information. So, and I was particularly worked with David Crane for many years throughout my tenure in City Council, and thank him for all of his work, but really to the entire panel. Thank you so much for being here and for the work that you've been doing on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Mr. Wexler, do you have a question for Mr. Crane?
Yes, I do. I know you've spoken mostly in terms of the failings concerning the KUAs. Just want to swing back to something that I raised with the Commissioner, which concerns the issue of backup and standing firm in the wake of potential backlash. And I'm wondering if you and your fellow frontline workers feel that you are getting the support you need. And the reason I ask is it wasn't always the case. Back in 2016, as I'm sure you know, Vanessa Fields of your union testified before the Philadelphia City Council. And at that time, she said, quote, "Workers are afraid that they're going to be disciplined if anything goes wrong on a case. So their thing is, well, I'm just going to take the kid out of the home and put them in care. That way I don't have to worry about being written up or disciplined because I left the children in the home and something happened to them. You place the kid outside of the home because you don't want to be in a situation where you left a child in the home and something happened to them." Do you feel that you have more support, since no system is immune from tragedy and every system will have such cases? Do you feel you have the backup to use your judgment to a greater degree than your predecessor did in 2016?
I would have to say that I believe that I feel I have more support from the current commissioner than the previous ones. Even on my own personal level, I got disciplined back in 2013 for trying to keep a kid out of formal placement. I think one of the issues that we have going on now is that I work on the overnight shift primarily, and a lot of times is that the burden falls onto us when there's not like a direct line of communications open. So that, say, if we can't get in touch with the people on call, it falls back on us. Say, for example, on the midnight to 8 shift, on 4 out of the 7 days, on the midnight to 8, there's 3 workers. And on certain nights, we have 8, 9, 10 kids in the childcare room with 1 childcare worker. So then we have to make up for that burden. And then, it's appeared from at least my perspective and some of my coworkers that when it gets into, I kind of want to say, I really don't want to say debate, but kind of like a conversation about the best way to proceed, is that no one really like takes into account what we see on the front lines. So kind of like, I hate to make the comparison, but say for the police, for example, if they would request a sergeant or a quote unquote white shirt to show up, they show up, right? Where when we request, say, for assistance, that person in our management is not there. So it's kind of working off of like who's actually seeing it and talking to the families versus who's not doing it. And I'd like to think over the course of time, some of those issues could be resolved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wexler. Are there other questions or comments by members of this committee for either of the panelists? I don't see anyone indicating that they have a question or comment, so I will go ahead with mine, particularly for, and I thank you both, but let me ask Mr. Crane. I think the public would assume that DHS workers, case workers, or whomever, would have more clout than a private or nonprofit worker because they are public employees. But from what you're saying, you cannot have a lot of limitations, it sounds like, with the current system. How could it be improved?
I think there's a lot of like smaller ways maybe things could be improved. One thing I honestly feel bad for some of the CUA workers, because even the ones that try, at least in theory, they get our hardest cases. So they get the cases where the family's already accepted for service, or the child's already in placement. So it's not like on a case basis that they get kind of say like a quote unquote like easy case, right? And there's not a lot of I should say from my time at DHS, I've been able to learn the best from the people who I work around, and and that's how I got through some of my own stuff. I don't think that there's a lot of camaraderie between the staff at DHS and staff at CUA. So, say for example, I think what could kind of mitigate some of the issues is if they were having a hard time finding a placement for kids and had to bring the kids to our childcare room, the on-call CUA staff could also be there to assist, so that way we could see what each other goes through versus having, say, like blind assumptions. And like equally, I think it's kind of difficult for the children in our child care room to sit in an office building. You know, it's inherently not normal, right? I could imagine that from some of the properties that's owned by the city, say, that one of them could be rehabbed and staffed by our staff. So that way those youth, if they had to sit there, that they could sit inside a home. We've had a number of kids that have came in and thought that they were going into a hospital, and it's our child care room. And I think that, you know, if there's more direct communication, and I want to say honest communication between the staff and the management, I think things could work themselves out too. Instead of trying to push the burden back onto each other.
Thank you very much for that. It sounds to me, when I hear your testimony, that, for example, from the testimony of Vanessa Fields and from what I know from certain mandated reporters and their employers and supervisors, like fire engine or some emergency vehicle passing by, I'll let it pass by. It sounds like a system that has become a penalty-driven system, most likely based on legislation that tried to legislate conduct by those professionals, and at least it appears to me it has not really worked out well. We have doctors and principals and teachers who are subject to being second guessed, and therefore rather just report everything than use judgment. And it sounds like DHS workers are heavily influenced to place rather than take the blame for not placing. A penalty-driven system. Is that accurate, or could you react to what I said? Do you think that's true? Not true? Am I missing something?
I think I've seen over the course of my time that over the course of, say, the past few years, that it has been more punishment-driven. Although, I mean, I can't say from the current commissioner and the deputy commissioners, you know, that from their end it's been a lot more open communication. But seeing from the ground level, I guess you could say that you know, it's come off more of a dictatorship than it is like an actual social service program.
We have a organization, Turning Points for Children. It has 4 CUAs that are in charge of providing services to children. We are discussing a case that none of us would have known about if it was not reported in a newspaper. And even so, we are restricted from getting into details or having questions answered from Turning Points or DHS itself, you know, because of the law. And I understand that. It certainly makes our job as a special committee or as council members, you know, ever more difficult. But Turning Points has received $54 million. I don't know if that includes the $6.3 million that is paid for its insurance premium, $6.3 million in addition, or if that includes that. And for whatever reason, they have not appeared today to answer questions, albeit we can only ask a limited number of questions, quite restricted. It does not seem like a organization that is willing to come forward in light of what was revealed, a shocking failure to protect three girls from very serious harm. What do you think, from your perspective as someone in the Department of Human Services, what do you think should happen that would give you confidence? I mean, is this something that's okay, or should we say that maybe something's being done we don't understand? But is this something that you think is typical or atypical of what's happening in our city with the KUAs?
To be perfectly honest, I think that the KUA work has become more of like a I can't think of the best word, but kind of like a hit or miss process, and that they've been trying to learn by trial and error. And I think that when you're dealing with the families, is you really don't have that time to per se learn. You know what I'm saying? And seeing from a lot of times, if the KUA would say fail to do something or follow up, it's going to fall back on to DHS anyway. So it's kind of like there's really nothing to hold them accountable per se. So that if they can't find placement during the day, they just drop the kids off at DHS. If they don't follow a court order exactly the way it's supposed to be, it's going to be picked up by DHS. So I think that there needs to be kind of some way to create a real sense of accountability. When in the same respect, there needs to be a real sense of support too. That there's plenty of co-workers that are trying to do their best, and we need to find a way to work with them as well and improve like their status with it too, because from my time sitting recently, like from the teenagers that we deal with, there's a lot involved in sex trafficking. We've recently had 2 teenagers over the course of the past couple of years that were charged that were murder. And I'm sure the taxing effect on the KUA workers who are reasonably newer to the social service system and dealing with cases that strong and probably not having any real kind of support besides you have to get certain things done. So, I mean, I think if we work on the supports on a very basic level, and then on the management level work on accountability, I would hope things could be worked out. And then to have kind of like a clear kind of communication with the courts. Because if we get like the kid that needs to be placed out of county, that kid probably shows up to us at 2 or 3 in the morning, and there's no out of county placements at that time. Just as an example.
Thank you very much. That completes my line of questioning. I'll just ask the committee members if they have any questions or comments before moving on to our last panel. There being none, I'll ask the clerk to call the next panel, and I'll thank the witnesses on this panel.
So I believe we are concluded with our witnesses, so we just have 2 members of the public that would like to make remarks.
Okay, would you call them for public comment?
So the 2 names are April McBride and Bridget Powell. I don't know if council tech staff needs a minute to connect them.
We are connecting.
Please leave your message for 2158821.
Okay, the first participant is not answering the phone. We're going to try the second participant for public comment.
Hello.
Name and provide us your testimony. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Powell, and I want to thank the Special Committee on Child Separation in Philadelphia for all that you've done. This topic of KUA has become an overly concerning topic for me. The KUAs have been a nightmare to my family, who do the minimum to ensure the safety of our youth. As a resource parent, I've had the displeasure of seeing the oversight of KUAs. I've had 6 KUA workers in the last 11 months from Turning Points of Children. For a child in my care, her safety visit this month was with the 6 social workers who double parked in the middle of my block, stayed in my house for less than 6 minutes for her safety check. Prior to that, he called and scheduled for a visit, and he thought I had another child in my care. The worker never saw the child before, so he asked me if this is the child that he was coming to see. I said yes. He said, I just need to see where she sleeps. I asked myself, is this the kind of visit that Danielle Kelly received before she died in DHS care? What type of safety visits are acceptable for KUA? KUAs are ignoring judges' orders and state law. Why is this okay? Judges give orders to explore family, and KUA picks at the wording that the judges use on the documents. KUA says they're just to explore and not place children. Fit and able relatives are ignored for years, and then KUA says they're not moving the children because they've been with these families for long and they don't know these relatives. I've also had a KUA worker lie on me and say that she was waiting for my clearances for placement of the child I currently have. But my question was, how could you be waiting for my clearances if you never asked me my Social Security number? My current foster child spent too many months in foster care until I went up the chain of command to get her placed with me. Siblings weren't seeing each other, which is another state law that KUA always ignores. KUA denied my child from seeing her siblings, stating she was too medically fragile, but she attends a regular daycare. I had to obtain a doctor's note in order for her to start her sibling visits 8 months after she was born. KUA has also asked siblings to miss school to do sibling visits. How and why is this acceptable? KUA turns a blind eye to foster homes, like the one where my niece is placed at, with a man who has pending gun charges for terroristic threats, for threatening to blow his tenant's head off with a gun, which he is not licensed to carry, which is another pending charge he has with the city of Philadelphia. How is this acceptable in the city of Philadelphia currently with all the violence and the guns and with children killing each other accidentally? KUA continues to turn a blind eye, which is not in the best interest of children. The KUA workers never mentioned that there was an adult male living in the foster home who is the husband of the foster parent where my niece lives. But she's quick to point out that she didn't see siblings in the home of the aunt who are not under DHS care, so she doesn't have to see these children. KUA is taking children out of homes where documents exist that there are no safety issues. Families have safety plans, and according to the flow chart given to me by Councilman Clark when I met with him, they're supposed to receive services in their home and not be removed. So why is KUA and DHS not following their own policies? The system is overloaded, and their own system is not appropriately following their own policies. I will submit the flow chart along with my testimony. I continue to receive retaliation when I report KUA. The most recent was a motion to remove the child that's currently in my care from my home. The DHS attorney based it on incorrect information, which could have easily been rectified if the KUA worker had came and saw the child, reviewed her medical records, or even attended a doctor's appointment. What KUA did is they came to CHOP and claimed they didn't know where to park at. And we all know that CHOP is a large facility, and all they have is on-site parking lots. KUA does not provide families with information to prevent them from getting into the system. I know because as an aunt on April 15, 2016, KUA nor did the DHS investigator tell me how I could go get custody of my niece to keep her out of the system. Where is the family blood preservation? When will KUA return the children that they took during the years of the highest removal in 2016? Will you right the wrongs and return the children who needed only services in 2016? Currently, DHS has filed a motion to dismiss my adoption petition for my niece, but they're allowing me to foster non-relatives. I'm really not understanding this whole KUA and DHS system. Why is it okay for me to have my niece erased from our family and adopted out to someone who's not allowing us to see her? Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much. I'll ask, is our other witness available for public comment? That would be April McBride.
Good afternoon. How may I help you?
Yes, please state your name and provide us with your testimony.
Hi, yes, my name is April McBride, and I'm calling to testify on resolution number 210914.
Please go ahead. We're listening.
Good morning. My testimony. Good afternoon, everyone. My testimony is the testimony of Commissioner Cynthia F. Figueroa on February the 12th, 2019 states that child abuse reporting requirements are set by state law and the Child Protective Services law of Pennsylvania. And me pulling these laws up from the Pennsylvania General Assembly, Title 24, number 634, letter C and letter D, it states that the use of reasonable force on or against the child by the child's own parent or person responsible for the child's welfare should not be considered abuse if any of the following conditions apply. The use of reasonable force constitutes incidental minor or reasonable physical contact with the child or the actions that are designed to maintain order and control. The use of reasonable force is necessary to quell a disturbance or remove the child from the scene of a disturbance that threatens physical injury to persons or to damage property. To prevent the child from self-inflicted physical harm, for self-defense or the defense of another individual, to obtain possession of weapons or other dangerous objects or controlled substances or paraphernalia that are on the child or within the control of the child. Section D of this same area states, rights of parents states, nothing in this chapter shall be construed to restrict the generally recognized existing rights of parents to use reasonable force on or against their children for the purpose of supervision, control, and discipline of their children. Such reasonable force shall not constitute child abuse. And Philadelphia DHS has been abusive with putting parents on their child abuse registry with no proof, no legal representation stating that their parent was locked up or anything of that nature. They have been using this tactic for retaliation and also financial gain if needed. This is a big issue across Pennsylvania as well as other states, and this is definitely unconstitutional. And I'm requesting myself for my case to be looked into because I am on the special committee child separation case study. Once again, my name is April McBride, and I have been for 4 years on a child abuse registry with no valid proof, no testimony from a doctor or anything, just pure mere retaliation from a caseworker that had it out for me because I knew my rights and I hired a legal attorney. So therefore, I am requesting for for the special committee to also include a review of anybody that was placed on a child abuse registry unlawfully and request for them to be taken off immediately. Though I understand that things are changing for DHS because they have been exposed. But if they haven't been exposed, what would be the outcome? Would it still be the same? Why are these numbers for fiscal year 2018, 2019, and 2020 not revealed to the public? And also, I have also sat in on oversight board meetings on the very first one was in October, no, not October, but in 2019, where I sat there and literally saw the caseworkers and everybody else that was in this meeting cheering for numbers that, oh, this many kids, that many kids. And then I realized, I said, they're taking kids for quotas for this funding. I said that was a very sick ordeal. And I also would like to request for these particular people, these caseworkers and anybody involved with these children, the same way that they have us go and get a mental evaluation, that they do the same. Nobody's perfect, and we know that they're not above the law. So I'm not understanding why I am sitting on a state child abuse registry and I didn't commit a child abuse crime according to state law. And according to Cynthia Figueroa, which they said that they follow state law. Apparently they don't. And that's all I have to speak on with my testimony.
Thank you very much. Clark, do we have any other person signed up for public comment?
We do not. It was just the two.
Okay. I will say that I have received a written statement from Turning Points. I will read it, but I do understand that we have a comment from Miss Yolanda Bryant.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention also about the COOs and the Turning Points, knowing about COA 3, which was also the COA that was mentioned in this resolution. Being a part of it, my grandkids also was a part of visitations from people that wasn't allowed to be on a list. They was allowing, outsiders to come in, to visit the kids that was never on the list, and their responsibility role of the legal wise of things that they do. And, even though we had the testimony from the commissioner and was saying how everything is doing good, as going through these things, and just like the witnesses had just testified, knowingly that these things are happening to families out there. I'm positive and can testify also if I was on the testimony part that COA 3 is failing at what the things that they doing. They have their supervision is wrong. And it's not just COA 3, it's other COAs that's doing things that we need to make a change on. And I feel like if we don't change the things that's happening, one, like they testified about the open courts, and change the family funding that they get and the funding that they asking for, that there's not going to be a difference. For us to see a difference, we need to make a change towards the courts being open, to mandate I'm so sorry because I had everything like together, but like for the families to actually be unfounded, to get there. Bridget Powell mentioned back in 2015. Okay, so they not going back in the years that they kept all of these children. All of these children is still being held. And it's a good thing that Cindy Bash, thank you, Councilman Woman Cindy Bash asked for the numbers, because that's what's going to bring the results. We want to see the numbers. We want to see the numbers from the years that's passed, even in the funding. Because when I looked at the funding, CORE used most of their money on millions of dollars on just their supplies. And I can prove this by showing the sheets, the charts. They have charts on their spending money, on their coffee. It don't take thousands, $10,000, $20,000 just to get, just supplies for one cool age, millions of dollars just to get this when the kids are failing. So it's a lot of things that's happening in these cool agencies. Like I said, my granddaughter was raped, and they still allowed her to go back to the rapist. And this is one of the court workers left the case because she didn't want to be a part of my 2-year-old granddaughter case because of what's happening. She said that they was trying to rush adoption, which they trying to do now. And this is at Court 3. The court worker resigned from there. And she's on tape. This is on video. She willingly videoed herself and offered that if we need any help, that she will help. So this is the type of things that's happening. So yes, this story with the 3-year-old girl, the 3 little girls, they made the big story, but it's a lot of big stories that's being overlooked. It's a lot of families that's hurt, and it's a lot of families that's suffering from the hands of KUA, because I feel like KUA is just a cover up for DHS. It's just DHS said they needed help, but it's not the help. It's just that no one is being accountable for what's happening to these families. And we need accountability. And that's what we need to go for, accountability for KUA and DHS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do not have any further witnesses to my knowledge and no further comment. So I am going to read into the record the statement that I received from Turning Points for Children. For those in the public watching, this is a resolution to investigate, to learn further about community umbrella organizations such as Turning Points for Children, and in particular to investigate systemic failures that may arise or have arisen, which resulted in 3 young girls being placed with a abusive father, despite many conditions that would alert the provider not to do that. And this is the statement I have received. May 6, 2022, Turning Points for Children. The following letter can be attributed to David Fair, Deputy CEO, Turning Points for Children. Turning Points for Children, Turning Points, is grateful for the city's commitment to the safety and well-being of children and families across Philadelphia, and the agency continues to be dedicated to working in partnership with the Department of Human Services, DHS, and City Council to ensure the health and safety of every child and family in the system. Turning Points for Children is a social service agency in Philadelphia, serving more than 17,000 youth and families across the region with a range of social service and family strengthening programs. Turning Point serves 7,000 youth in partnership with and under the leadership of DHS as part of 4 community umbrella agencies, KUAs. Turning Points is committed to a holistic, client-centered approach that focused on health, safety, community, and wellness for the individuals and families it serves. Any instance of a child not being protected while in our care weighs heavily on Turning Points. Our job is to keep the children in our care safe. When that doesn't happen, our duty is to work diligently and relentlessly to determine where changes may help ensure the care and safety of those we serve and mitigate further challenges. Turning Points is committed to reducing child abuse and improving the lives of children across our city. We work collaboratively with our city partners at DHS to increase oversight and auditing functions and identify additional steps for improvement. We remain committed to the complex work of child welfare in our city. KUAs are community-based agencies subcontracted with and operating under the license of Philadelphia's DHS. Turning Points KUAs are responsible for direct case management services for families in 4 of 10 regions in Philadelphia. The KUA model, to keep children and families as close as possible to their neighborhoods, was adopted by DHS in 2013 and is rooted in an evidence-based approach. In addition, a core goal of the child welfare system is to safely reunite children with their families. Decisions regarding child placement are made by judges following recommendations from a group of stakeholders, including DHS, child advocates, parent attorneys, and KUAs. Turning Points and its partner, KUAs, cannot unilaterally determine where a child is placed or when a child is reunited with parents. Every day across all of the city's KUAs, case managers must assure the child's physical and emotional safety, support academic and other education-related progress, assure medical, dental, and behavioral health needs are met, transport the child when necessary to and from school and appointments, supervise visits with family members, make sure foster parents have what they need to care for the child, help birth parents and other family members, obtain the often wide range of health, social service, and other practical services they need to be able to reunify with their children, and identify other family members and community supports. All the while, they must act as mentor, a counselor, a trusted friend, committed to keeping the family together against incredible odds. The work of child welfare is deeply rewarding and deeply complex. We are proud to partner with DHS and our brother and sister KUA provider agencies to care for the children and families of Philadelphia. Turning Points is deeply committed to the safety and well-being of all children in our care and will continue to work diligently with DHS and City Council in an ongoing manner to create safety mechanisms and quality protocols to ensure an effective system in the best interest of the children served. That's the letter that I've received. I've read into the record, and that concludes the testimony, statements, and public comment. I will finally ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make a comment who did not have a chance to do so, including any of our witnesses, anyone in attendance, our committee members, and anyone in our viewing public that was able to sign up for public comment and was unable to do that. Hearing none, I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. This concludes the business before the Special Committee on Child Separation in Philadelphia. Thank you all very much for your attendance and participation. Everybody have a nice day.